Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Lugos Journey podcast. Today, I have on Colin Robertson, the author of The Will of Heroes, and I want him to introduce himself.
Sure. Colin Robertson. I've been an entrepreneur since graduating from college and wrote The Will of Heroes in 2016 as I was trying to understand more about what is the science behind greatness. And what I did is I turned to the stories of 12 of my biggest inspirations throughout all the books that I had read and all the stories that I'd heard over the years to understand how willpower led to their success in a wide variety of fields and help them overcome different barriers along their journey in order to better understand how me and everyone else that was following my blog at the time could do that as well.
Yeah, so I found it actually kind of surprised me, but it didn't surprise me that when I'm looking through, how many people actually succeed in their goals, how many people actually strive for something incredible and actually achieve it. And you brought in a quote that was introduced by a study, and I think this is a great place to start. This is the stat of heroes. Only 8% of people are able to push through temptation to quit. The other 92% of people get lost in the middle of their journey. And
yeah
I find it to be incredibly interesting to really go through, like this book, The Will of Heroes, is all about what is the thing that makes people fail, right? And I would
hmm
love for you to start with where this book started. This book started with Kobe Bryant, and to tell me his story, the story of, such an incredible hero in almost all of our lives, an absolute inspiration, how he, started his journey and how he actually became a hero.
Yeah, so obviously the story of Kobe Bryant was tragically cut short this year, which had a really much bigger effect on me than I anticipated it, because I looked into where he came from. He started out in Italy. His dad was a professional basketball player, but wasn't quite good enough to make an NBA career out of it. And so he was playing professionally out in I forget the name of the Italian town, but it was a small town. It wasn't even like Milan or one of the major cities there. Anyway, he came back to America, to Philadelphia, when he was 12 years old. And for the first time, he was going to have to play basketball against American kids for the very first time. And he went to a basketball camp, played against all of them, and didn't score 1 point. Like we see someone like Kobe Bryant, someone who's a basketball prodigy. Dad played basketball. You think like he's one of the most talented basketball players to ever live, and yet as a 12-year-old kid, he didn't even score a layup in an entire summer camp. And the fact that someone like that could become Kobe Bryant and could win 5 championships, 2 league MVPs, and be one of the greatest basketball players of all time was just that's really what started my journey. Was what did he do differently? And the more I learned about him was just it was insane how much harder he worked than everybody else, even the really great players like LeBron James. He worked so much harder than them to earn every single thing that he got throughout his basketball career.
Yeah, I mean, Kobe was one of my inspirations when I went and played basketball. And I found, he had a quote which, really supports exactly what you were just saying. And he said that when he got to the NBA, he thought that everybody had the passion like he would. He thought that this would be the place
Yeah,
where everybody was, working 8 hours a day, training 10 something, something like that, hours a day. And he said, no, for most people, this is just a job. But for him, this is his
yeah,
life. And
yeah,
I
yeah.
think one of the most important questions that we're, trying to answer here is, why don't people pursue their goals? What's the difference between the people
Sure.
who really go out and pursue their goals and the people who don't? And I think the first step on any hero's path, we could say, is failure, right? Like Kobe was 12 years old when this happened, and he scored
hmm
0 points. And 6 years later, he was drafted out of high school, I think 13th overall in the NBA. And I think we
hmm
must ask ourselves, also Michael Jordan, right, Kobe's inspiration, also got
hmm
cut from his varsity team, right, in
Yep.
high school, and also ended up becoming one of the best players of all time. And I think one of the
hmm
things that we must ask ourselves is, out of the one Kobe, out of the one Michael Jordan, how many people to how many people in this ratio were experienced this sort of failure and then just stopped trying and just gave up? How many
Hmm.
people got cut from their varsity team? How many people didn't score a single point and then just gave up and moved on to something else?
Hmm. Yeah. So I love one of the stories that I love the most that kind of highlights this. And I think it is where the statistic that you brought up about 92% of people who ever try a goal never make it to the finish line. Most of us, the story that came from was J.K. Rowling. And she started her journey in the way that many of us do, through a big act of inspiration. You know, she was on a train from Manchester to London, and all of a sudden the idea for Harry Potter came to her. And she saw Hogwarts, she saw Harry, she saw all of the characters that we would eventually know and love throughout the world. But it was 5 years from when she came up with that idea to when Harry actually ended up on bookshelves. And throughout that, or in the midst of that process, she had a daughter. She got fired from her job. She had to go on, or she was in extreme poverty. Like, there were so many things that many of us would have said, "Oh well, I'm going to give up on my dream because X, Y, and Z happens," and then obviously never make it to the end of the journey to where she's the first billionaire author ever.
Yeah.
Um, you wonder how many J.K. Rowlings never came to be because they quit at some point in that 5 years.
And that actually, when I read that, that bothered me. Not only that, but she went to 12 different publishers and they all
Yeah,
turned her down until she hit the 13th.
yeah,
And it's like how,
yeah.
Harry Potter has blessed so many children's lives. Like it was a phenomenon. Like imagine seeing,
Hmm.
children reading 700-page books on end, multiple 700-page books.
I
And
know, I know.
that wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for J.K. Rowling, with this
Yeah,
tremendous will.
yeah, yeah. I was incredibly inspired by her story. And yeah, I think about that often, is just how many people would have become J.K. Rowling, but just gave up at some point in those 5 years.
Yeah, so I mean, you talk about it in your book, and I love the story. Or first of all, the principle that I found was really incredible is grit, right?
Mm, yeah.
The character trait of grit is such a
Hmm.
weird thing. It's like, all right, it's just somebody who is very motivated and is willing to put in the boring hours and put in the boring time. But at the same time, it is the number one predictor of grades. It's not
Hmm.
intelligence, it's not where you were raised or anything like that. It's how hard you work and how much you are willing to put in for those boring hours.
Sure. Another important thing, just to give people who are listening who haven't heard of grit before, grit is a term that was popularized anyway by a researcher at Penn named Angela Duckworth. She has a great book on the topic. I highly recommend it to anyone who wants to read it. It's called Grit. It is passion and perseverance towards a very specific long-term goal. So a lot of us talk about the things that we're passionate about, or we talk about things like perseverance. But the thing that makes grit different, and the reason why it's the number one predictor of success, is that it's focused. J.K. Rowling didn't spend those 5 years just writing a whole bunch of different books. She spent them writing the one book she knew would be her masterpiece, at least in her mind at that time, it was going to be her masterpiece. And she didn't stray from that. Is that all of those hard, boring hours were on that one book, that one story that she knew needed to come to the world because it would be loved by people. Nobody could have predicted it would have been this loved by people, but she knew in her heart that's what that one focused goal was, what was worth working towards.
So why do you think it is that I mean, I've personally noticed this in my own life. Why do you think it is that we could only focus on one goal at a time, right? Like why can't I have four goals and try to achieve them all? Why do I have to focus on just one?
I wish that I knew the answer to that specifically, but I think that it's, you know, we think about this in entrepreneurship a lot, but when there's only one thing on your mind that you wake up every day thinking about, you're in the shower thinking about, you're talking to people about, like if it's just one thing that you're working on at a time, your brain is just able to focus so much more and filter all of your experiences and everything you learn through that one lens that helps make that thing even stronger. I think especially in a world that is so noisy like it is today, unless if you create a bunch of little things that are just okay, then it's just not going to make it through the noise that's out there. If you focus on one thing and continually do it better and better and better and better, that has a much better chance of breaking through the noise because it'll be truly great.
Yeah, there were two very great analogies that I heard from this. One of them came from your book, which I thought was incredible. You use the analogy of chopping down a tree. If you try to chop
Yeah,
down a
yeah,
tree, if you have an axe and you're trying to chop down the tree, you want to hit the same spot because you're going to keep making dents in the wood, and then eventually you're going to get the tree down. But if you keep trying to chop at different spots, you're going to get nowhere. And
yeah, exactly.
another great analogy that I really loved was if I'm holding out a piece of paper and I try to take a pen or a needle and I try to push it through the paper, what will be better if I take 5 different needles and try to push them at the same time on different points, or if I take one giant needle and try to push it right through? And
Mm,
and the answer is by pushing that one thing down on the paper, you develop this sort of this focus of giving the tension on that one spot, and hopefully if you give it more and more tension, then there's going to be a clean break.
yeah, where did you hear that one from?
I heard that it was in a book called The Four Disciplines of Execution.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, I read that a couple of years ago.
it was a great book by Stephen Covey, the guy who wrote
Hmm.
7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Yeah, yeah.
So another topic that I did want to get into that, so first, I think right now we're talking about why don't people start on the right path, like
Hmm.
like the people with Kobe and Michael Jordan, right? They really didn't start. Like they were one of the few people that actually did start. Another reason that I think people really don't start is the story of Vince Lombardi. He's the guy
Hmm.
who has now become a legend. But you know what? I could definitely believe that because of the things that he went through, there are probably millions of people like him that probably just gave up. And I would love to hear you tell his story too.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so for many, I'm sure many people haven't heard this part, but Vince Lombardi, I believe he was a successful coach in the 1960s, but when he was coming up in the 1930s and 40s as a football coach, uh, there was Italians like him were highly discriminated against. I believe there was a quote that someone said that no person with an I for their last name will ever be a coach of an NFL team. It's crazy to think today, but that was the level of discrimination that was prevalent back in the 1930s and 40s. And so he had to work his way up from the very bottom. So he was a high school coach, and then he worked his way up into being a college coach. And I believe that he could only be an offensive coordinator at first, and he was only allowed to be an offensive coordinator for a long period of time in college before he was finally given the opportunity to do it again or do it in the pros for the New York Giants. And he stayed with the New York Giants and helped them win several Super Bowls, I think, while he was there, with the best offense in the country. And he just continually got passed over as an NFL head coach until he finally got his one opportunity in Green Bay. He was the first ever Italian to be hired as a head football coach, and he knew that if he didn't make things happen in Green Bay, he would never get another chance. This was the opportunity of a lifetime for him. And at that point, Green Bay was basically like Siberia. It was basically being sent to a place where it was incredibly cold and you were going to fail no matter what. They were the joke of the league. And he turned them into a winning team his first year. And I believe it was only a couple of years before they won a Super Bowl. And the most inspiring thing of this is that he became the winningest coach ever because he just kept at it, even though he faced discrimination for decades before finally someone gave him the opportunity to take over an NFL team.
And I think it's a beautiful story. Like the fact that I'm not sure if everybody else knows the Super Bowl trophy, right, is called the Lombardi Trophy now because
Yeah.
it took him, I think it was 3 years, 3 years. So the year before the year before he got there, they were terrible, lost almost every game. The next
Hmm.
season they went 7-5. The next season they lost in the championship game, and then the next year they won the first ever Super Bowl, and then they won it again
Yeah.
the next year. And I think one of the best parts about Vince Lombardi was that he just had this, tremendous tenacity to learn. And I found that you know even pushing through the discrimination, pushing through all these barriers, he still was able to learn and still be able to have that grit to really push through.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And you wonder where that came from, because when we it is incredibly frustrating, and it makes you feel like there's no way you can ever overcome it when you're in a corrupt system. When you're trying to do things, and you're doing the absolute best that you're capable of, and you're better than a lot of, or you're producing better results than a lot of the people around you, and just because of who you are, and other people's discrimination towards you, you don't get the chances that the other people do. The fact that he was able to just keep at it until he got that opportunity, and then obviously deserved it. I think that's an inspiring thing for anybody who's been discriminated against in the past, to
Yeah.
know that uh, it's not going to be forever, and that if you just keep at it, you can overcome those things, even though it's unfair and you shouldn't have to go through that. That it's not inevitable that you're going to be held down by those systems.
Exactly. And I find that, along every hero's path, along every successful person's path, every role model, you see that there are barriers in the way. Like if there were no barriers on the way to success, then it wouldn't be called success because everyone could do it,
Sure.
right? So
Hmm.
you look at someone like Kobe, you look at someone like Jordan, you look at someone like J.K. Rowling, like all these heroes had their specific barriers that they went through. Vince Lombardi didn't
Hmm.
really have to deal with poverty as much as J.K. Rowling had to go through. But even
Hmm.
though all these people had their barriers, they never made excuses, and they
Hmm.
had this. There's this really great quote that I really like. So someone said, here it was actually right here. It says, working hard and having discipline, it's really hard, right? Like it's really hard to do.
Hmm.
But at the same time, so is, not working hard. If you're not working hard and you're just relaxing, the pain and the regret that you feel is also hard. Like eating
Hmm.
way too much and and overeating, that's hard because you feel the regret, but
Yeah.
also maintaining the discipline of a diet is hard. And the only thing is you must pick your hard. It's not like there will never be struggle. It's like you must choose your struggle, and your struggle should
Yeah.
hopefully involve the growth that comes with being a hero.
Yeah, absolutely. And now my thinking has evolved to take that exact same framework you're talking about and apply it to comfort zones. Is that going outside of your comfort zone is incredibly difficult. Putting yourself into a situation where you do public speaking, or make sales calls, or whatever it is that makes you feel uncomfortable. Staying within your comfort zone is just as hard as venturing outside of it. It's just a different pain you're dealing with, because either it's going to be the potential that you get rejected outside of your circle, or it's going to be that little voice in your head that talks to you saying that you'll never be able to get outside of there. So like you said, you got to pick your poison, and one of them is going to lead to growth. The other one is going to keep you trapped forever.
Yeah, and I think one thing that you talked about, which I mean personally, so this year I'm writing a book that's called
Mm.
it's called Break Your Bad Habits in 150 Pages, The Hero's Journey.
Hmm.
So obviously that was why
Hmm.
I was so interested in having you on here.
Sure, sure.
One of the important parts of the hero's journey is that you must travel outside of your known land, outside of your comfort zone. And what you described
Hmm.
it as was the chaos zone. So I would love for you to describe
Yeah.
that a little bit.
Sure. So lots of us know about your comfort zone, and just the area outside of that that leads to learning and growth. I forget the researcher, and I apologize for this, but what there was some researcher that identified it as the learning zone, or your comfort zone, and then that area just beyond it is the learning zone. But if you go too far, then it's the chaos zone. This is the situation where, to use a sports analogy, it's like 12-year-old Kobe taking on Michael Jordan, on the Bulls. Like, he's not going to learn anything from there. He's just going to get rocked. But 12-year-old Kobe taking on other 12-year-olds his age in America that maybe weren't as good as the ones in summer camp, like, that's where he's going to start learning. In Italy, he was in his comfort zone. Like, there wasn't the same level of competition in Italy as there was amongst American kids. And so now that he was playing with 12-year-olds in America again, that's how he was able to learn. That's how he was able to grow and become a better basketball player every day. We see this all the time with like New Year's resolutions people. They always go from being in their comfort zones to being in the chaos zone, and they try to go from not exercising at all to trying to exercise every single day. It's never going to happen, and you need to take those slow steps outside your comfort zone in order to learn and grow and see that you have the capability to do this.
Yeah, so actually, just to clarify, because of course, I love to keep this informational. So G.F.
Sure.
Colvin was the guy who called it the chaos
Yeah.
zone, and I thought that was such an interesting way of thinking. So imagine, I think we all go through this, and this is probably the second barrier of taking action and making some big change. I must tell you, last night I was I was sitting and I was looking at my goals, and I make goals for the week, and I write down my goals. I get all excited about my goals, but sometimes I set
Sure.
goals that are a little too high for myself, and
Yeah.
I looked at it, and last week I didn't achieve any of my goals. And
Mm,
partially was because I try to step way too far outside of my comfort zone. And I think that's
yeah.
such an innate part of us. I think that's such a big flaw that we have, that, you know what, I could say, I haven't worked out in 4 years, and I eat so awful and all these things, but tomorrow I am going to work out for 3 hours. I'm going to only eat kale.
Yeah.
And, it's like our brains aren't wired for that. I agree. It's too far in the chaos zone.
Yeah, absolutely. And bringing it back to the hero's journey and venturing outside of the status quo, like, all of the best stories are the ones where they face challenges that are just beyond what they're currently capable of, because that's what allows them to rise to the occasion and overcome whatever obstacle in their path is, and then come back and learn and grow and become a better person in the end.
Yeah. So I
So
think, I'll keep
I
going.
love the fact that you contextualize goals in that way, and that you can see every single day like that, and achieving whatever goals are on your list like that as well. And if you can just keep reining those in a little bit, and overcome that human desire to not only set goals that are too far, but when you don't hit those, say like, oh, I'm going to make up for it by making even more progress on it next week or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. So there were two things, actually. So Dan Coyle, in the Talent Code, and this was obviously from your book, he said that success from 60 to 80% of the time is the sweet spot. Because if you're
Yeah.
succeeding
Yeah.
100% of the time, then it's too easy. But if you're succeeding
Hmm.
40% of the time or anything lower, it's like, you're making it a little too hard for yourself. You got to be able to achieve them a little bit more, have that good feeling of getting goals. And I think
Yeah.
the most incredible thing that I like, this blew my mind when I was reading this. You just referenced it right there, where there's something wrong with us in the fact that when we decide to set a goal, so there was a study, right, where some kids said that they were going to go and work out for 20 hours in a week. And actually, I would
Yeah.
love for you to finish this because, you were the one who wrote it.
Yeah, you read it more recently than I do. I don't remember the details, but if you want to fill in the details later, feel free. But they set a goal to work out 20 hours per week. I think only like 10% of them actually were able to
Yep.
hit that, and the 90% that didn't, the researchers thought, okay, they tried to work out for 20 hours a week. They didn't do it. So what they're going to do is learn from that experience and say, oh, maybe I can try out 10 or 15 hours a week. Maybe that's more realistic for me. But instead, they, on average, went up to 25 hours a week. Is that right? Am I getting the details right on that
Yeah.
one?
So their average was they did 8 hours a week on average. But
Yeah,
when they made their goals for the next week, even though 90% of them failed, they said 25. They were going to work out 25
yeah.
hours.
Yeah, I'm sure everyone listening to this right now can totally relate to that. Is that, if you set a plan to eat extremely well this week, and for whatever reason you have a cheat day, life happens, you get stressed, and then you just decide to treat yourself. You don't say, oh, okay, this is probably going to happen again. I'm going to get stressed again in the future. Maybe I should plan a little bit less strictly so that I can have these situations where life gets in the way. No, you say, I'm going to eat even more perfect next week. And that's so much harder than what was already pretty much impossible for you to do in the first time around. Again, I don't know what the situation is with our brains, but that's the way we think.
Yeah,
And the best way to overcome this is to when you set all those goals that are too much for you, the best thing you can do is just be self-aware about those things. Just write down, okay, these are the reasons why, and then be honest with yourself about, like, are those things going to happen again in the future? Because we plan for the perfect best case scenario playing out throughout the week, where we're going to have perfect sleep, we're going to be extremely energetic, we're going to be extremely motivated, not we got bad news, or there was an extremely anxious election that took place, or whatever is happening in the news today. And those things get in the way, and we need to be able to learn and adapt from those things in order to actually become the people that we want to be.
Yeah, exactly. And I think one of the better solutions from, like, you get all this stress, you get all this anxiety, the answer is not to make it more, right? I think the biggest problem that any of us have, I think the biggest one is going to the gym, but it's more of breaking any bad habit, creating any good habit. We start off with too much intensity. We say we're going to go 20
Mhm.
hours a week, but what's wrong with going 4 hours a week,
Yeah.
And if we make it shorter, what I personally did was my whole problem, my whole life was I made it too intense, but I wasn't able to make it consistent. The problem is always consistency. It's never intensity. So what I did
Mm-hmm.
was I used, actually, you referenced in your book, the Jerry Seinfeld method. And all it
Yeah.
is every single day you do something small, right? So Jerry Seinfeld decided to write one joke per day. That's it. And
Mm-hmm.
every single time he wrote a joke, he put a little X on his check mark on his list, and he essentially made a streak. So after 20 days, after 15 days of making a streak, your
Mm-hmm.
pride gets too much in the way. You really don't want to break that streak. So even if you're tired,
Yeah.
even if you're exhausted, you're still going to want to do that. I did that personally for my workout routine. I woke up in the morning
Mm-hmm.
and I said, for my morning routine, instead of driving to the gym 5 minutes, then working out for an hour, and then going for another 5 minutes home, then showering, I'm going to get on the floor and I'm going to do one set of as many push-ups as I possibly could do. And then
Sure. Sure.
I'm going to do I do like hanging from a bar, one set
Mm-hmm.
of that. In total, it was a 3-minute workout, but I'm going to do it every single day. And then
Sure.
after I was able to do that, I think I did that for 60 straight days because
Mm-hmm.
I lowered the intensity and therefore increased the consistency. Then I started adding, now every day I do squats, right? Every day I add on
Mm-hmm.
another thing. And by the time that you make such a consistent habit, then you could build on it and build on it. And then eventually, if you're using this long-term strategy, this long-term approach, then you're going to be able to have that full 1 hour workout with the consistency built into it.
Yeah. 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 I think consistency is a thing that people underestimate the most. The best mental tool or mental trick I've come across to really understand the value of consistency here is it just look back on the last year of your life and ask yourself, if you just did that one set of push-ups every day or whatever for the last year, like, would that not be enough? Like, I'm sure that would put you in a much better position today than you would have been if you didn't do anything at all, or if you stuck with something for 20 days and then gave up on it, even if it was way, way more. And so there's nothing stopping you from doing those little things to start off. And then a year from now, you'll be in that position that you would have been looking back.
Yeah, and I think, this is all so valid, and the only thing that's really holding us back, like what we're speaking right now is so logical, right? But we're not really logical creatures,
Sure.
and we want
Yeah.
results. We want results right away. If I say I'm going to the gym next month, I want to gain, 30 pounds of muscle, and I want
Yeah.
to I want to look bulky. I'm not willing to put that off for maybe 2 years from now. So I think the reason why we set such big goals is because we're so focused on the results and not on the processes. And I think you talk about that in
Mhm.
your book about the processes approach versus the results approach. And I just want you to expand on that a
Yeah.
little bit.
Sure. So, like Nick said, when coming up with a goal, a lot of us focus on, okay, I'm going to lose, I don't know, 20 pounds in 2 months, or I'm going to gain 30 pounds of muscle in 6 months, or whatever it is. And we set a plan to achieve that goal, and usually we fall short. The process approach is more about, I'm going to go to the gym for 20 minutes every day, or I'm going to go for a walk around the block every day, or whatever it is that will help you become the person that you really want to be. It's much more important to take that approach, because then you can create the Jerry Seinfeld calendar that you're talking about, and put a big X on all the days that you do the thing. And then you prove to yourself that you're capable of creating change and becoming a better version of yourself every single day. And then, like you said, you can start adding on top of that, and you end up achieving goals that are way more than what you would have said if you took a results-oriented goal from the get-go. That's always been the biggest surprise to me as I followed that method, is that in some cases I achieve things that I wouldn't have even been able to conceptualize, like 30 pounds of muscle in 6 months or whatever, because you prove to yourself every day what you actually are capable of. And if you keep consistent, it's far more than you would have anticipated.
Exactly. And the fact that we focus, if you focus on those processes, if you focus on the things that will bring you closer to the goal instead of the goal itself, then you're able to really, get that you're bringing the motivation from something external, like let's say
Mm-hmm.
the scale, right? The weight on the scale, to something internal. You're really focusing on Stephen Covey, right? He talks about the lag measures versus the lead measures. And if you're focusing on
Yeah.
the lag measures, right, you're focusing on how much weight do I have. That's something you can't really
Mm-hmm.
change, right? Like you have to focus on what you could do to make the change for the next time. And then by the
Yeah.
time that you hit the scale again, you have to focus on what you could do to make the change for the next time. So I find that in my life, the best way of doing it is by changing the lifestyle, right? Changing these processes and saying, you know what, if I take a walk around the block, just by doing that, then that will affect the scale. That process will lead to the
Mm-hmm.
result. So maybe I should focus on the
Sure.
process more instead of the result.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And another advantage of that too is that I believe I touched on this topic during the Vince Lombardi chapter, where if you are focusing on those internal things that you're capable of, so I forget what it was for him, but um, he could focus on the things that he could control, and those were things like having a better understanding of film than the other coaches, or having a better understanding of the perfect plays on offense than the other coaches. He couldn't
Oh,
control those external things,
another thing.
like the discrimination that he was facing. Yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
no, and another thing that I really thought the main part about Vince Lombardi was the fact that he focused on effort rather than
Yes, that's
results.
it. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, so yeah, explain that. I mean, that's such a great point.
Yeah. So he, amongst his players, he knew that he couldn't always win every single game, no matter how well his players played, and no matter how hard he prepared or how well he coached. Like luck is a real thing that all of us are going to encounter, good luck and bad luck. But so those will impact your results, but they can't impact your effort. And so focusing on your effort and how much you are actually putting towards something is going to actually lead to better results over time by you focusing on that thing that you can control rather than the things that you can't.
Yeah, and there was something really interesting that you said. I really want to bring this quote because this was such a beautiful quote. You talked about Kobe Bryant, and you said, first of all, you talked about the self-esteem movement of the 1980s and
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, explain that. I mean, I'd love to hear it.
No, continue the story.
Oh, yeah,
I'll
no.
chime in when I can.
So it's incredible. So they used to believe, scientists used to believe that telling students that, great job, you did a great job on this, right? And you say, you're so smart. By giving them that positive feedback, they're like, oh, that's awesome, because it makes them think that they're smart and therefore they're going to do a good job. But as we talked about in this podcast before, the thing that determines their success is not their intelligence, but their grit. You know, it's how
Hmm.
hard they work. So when you reward them by saying, you know, and this has been psychologically proven, and he talks about this a lot in the book, when you tell them you did a great job, they're going to work less hard because they're going to, you did a great job, you're so smart. They're actually going to work less hard because they believe,
Hmm.
oh, wait, that means I'm smart. I don't have to work hard. I could just rely on my intelligence. But, and this is something that Asian communities do very well, and this that's another thing that they found. Asian communities, they reward hard work, right? They say, great job, you tried so hard on that, right? I could see how
Hmm.
well you struggled and how hard you struggled. And by doing that, they reward hard work and they reward the grit that actually brought them to success. So by
Hmm.
the time that people are actually you know, are working, they're saying, okay, the thing that's going to bring me to success is not the intelligence, but it's the hard work. And you said, this was one of the greatest quotes that I found. This blew me away. This would the self-esteem movement, so saying that you are amazing, and also at the same time when someone does bad, telling them, you know what, it's okay. Like you still have talent, right? Like you don't really have to work
Hmm.
hard. You said this would be like Kobe Bryant's parents telling him that he had a remarkable talent for basketball before he entered the basketball camp as a 12-year-old. And then, even though he did not score a single point, awarding him a trophy at the end of the camp out of fear that his failure would damage his self-esteem.
Yeah, yeah. The thing that I love contextualizing like that is that he didn't score a single point in the entire summer. And so if you weren't like, obviously he was probably devastated by that, but giving him a trophy and saying that he was great regardless, like he's 12 years old. He's smart enough to realize that that was disappointing. And what they did instead was say, we got a lot of work to do. If you really want to achieve this basketball dream that you've been working on, you know, through all the years in Italy and then wanting to join the summer camp in the first place, like if you really want to achieve your dream, we clearly have a lot of work to do. And so that's where his parents chose to focus instead of on making him feel better about something that was obviously very disappointing to him. And that takes a lot of courage as a parent to do that, to not take the easy path out and praise your kids when they're in a place of hurting like that. But ultimately, that's what's going to help them become the Kobe Bryants of the world, or the ones that are going to have the strength to persevere through the inevitable failures that life throws at us. Because once you get into the adult world, there's no one giving you a trophy if you get fired from a job, or from all the other hardships you're going to face, and knowing that focusing on the things that you can control when those hard times hit you is going to help you get out of them much more than blaming others or saying, I don't know what's wrong with the world for not understanding how special and unique I am.
Yeah, I think that such a counterintuitive thing, but at the same time, I feel like our society doesn't completely get it, or at least many people in our society don't get it. It's to
Yeah,
achieve growth, you must struggle, right?
absolutely. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's
So there's
so you know, go for it.
there's a great book. I forget. I think it's called Growth Mindset. It's something on that. But
Yes.
essentially, a researcher looked at the difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. And a fixed mindset is the one that's focused on talent, on smartness, on IQ, on all of those types of measures that we thought were important. A growth mindset is focused on how much does this person actually want to learn? How much are they willing to take critical feedback and learn from it and grow from it? And more, we're learning that it's the growth mindset that's leading to people who are more successful in life and, to be frank, a lot more well-rounded human beings than the ones that are focused on talent alone. And the more that you can focus on things like growth and learning and putting yourself into difficult situations, no matter what your level of talent, it's going to lead to you becoming more competent in whatever field you choose, but also a more humble and honest and confident person, because you realize that that failure is a path to success, and you don't need to shelter yourself from it, and that other people are going to fall in those times too, and that is a path that you can take out of failure, whatever that might be.
And I think one of the important points that, that you hit right away on this book when you talk about Mozart, but at the same time, I think it's
Hmm.
really important to really discuss. It's like, all right, there's the old saying of hard work beats talent, but there
Yeah,
is no denying that obviously, talent is important, but I think, it
sure.
really is true that there are so many talented people that really never make it, but there are also, there are much less people who work hard, work smart, and they might not be talented, but they go out and get it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's really impressive. And I think that the people I would actually love to see, let's see. Oops. Oh, yes. I would love to talk about the 10,000 hour rule. That was what it was. The 10,000 hour rule is something that came out. I'm not sure who the person who was that actually made it, but was that? Oh, Malcolm Gladwell. Yes. The
Yeah, he's
10,000 hour rule. And, yeah, describe it.
Malcolm Gladwell was the one who popularized the concept of the 10,000 hour rule. Of if you worked for 10,000, it takes 10,000 hours in any domain in order to become a master of it. And since then, there's been a lot of research showing that it's not as simple as that, because it's never quite as simple as any of those things. But that tells you how long it actually takes in order to become a master of anything. So I believe I bring this up in the chapter on Mozart, because he
Yes.
is often claimed as the most talented person ever, because at the age of 4 he was already starting to play very, very well and compose his own pieces on the piano. And at the age of, I believe, 5 or 6, he was actually performing in front of live audiences with his sister. But it wasn't and at the age of from 20 to 30, he composed more pieces that are known today than anybody ever. But the important thing to understand there is that at the age of 6 and 7, when he was performing in front of live audiences with his sister, it wasn't like he was composing things that were breathtaking or better than 30-year-olds or 40-year-olds or 50-year-olds could do at that time. It was just a part of the performance that, isn't it cute, these two kids are actually playing okay. And it was more about seeing that spectacle rather than the art being where it was. But that gave him the opportunity to continually practice and practice and practice, so that he had over 10,000 hours of practice by the time he turned 20. And that's when he became a master. And that's why he created some of the most renowned pieces, even to this day, from the age of 20 to 30.
Yeah, so you actually cited in your book, and this was a great quote I found. It said, "No composer had put out anything of significance until 10 years after their journey began." And I
Yeah,
think it's so
yeah. And that
true.
includes him. Yeah.
Exactly, right? Like, that kind of meshes with the 10,000 hour rule, but at the same time, it's like, you know
Hmm.
what? How difficult is it? Like how many people were talented. You can't just be talented and get it after 5 years. It's like, no, every single person who wrote a great composition actually had to do it for 10 years. So you think,
Mm-hmm.
there must have been a lot of people who were incredibly talented, who were probably more
Mm-hmm.
talented than Mozart. But then at the same time, they just weren't able to stick it out. They weren't able to put in those boring hours, those incredibly long hours of
Sure.
practicing the same monotonous work. But at the same time, that's what requires greatness. And that's the will of
Yeah.
heroes. I think that's
Mm-hmm.
incredibly powerful.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think there's one more hero that I really wanted to talk about,
Sure.
which is a very popular guy nowadays. But I think, the entire stock market just recognizes him as a hero, as someone with incredible willpower, and it's Warren Buffett.
Sure.
And he
Mm-hmm.
just, he is able to put in these incredibly long hours. And, that's the thing that makes him great.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, Warren Buffett is obviously one of the richest men in the world, and he did it being very incredibly humble throughout his entire life as well.
Mhm.
He also made the greatest charitable contribution ever, I believe.
Did he
I
really?
doubt he's ever going to be topped on that. Yeah, he gave, I think, 90% of his wealth to the Gates Foundation, something like that.
Wow.
And that wealth is obviously in the like almost 100 billion or something like that at this point. I'm not sure. But
Yeah.
anyway, he started by focusing on building what he called his snowball. He didn't want to create the huge quick returns that many people in the stock market try to get. He said, all I want to do is create a snowball of, a couple $1,000s at the age of like 10 years old, I think is when he started his investment journey, and grow it at 12% per year. And if all I do is grow that small snowball at 12% per year, but if I start at the age of 10, then it's going to grow into something huge. And obviously, he did much, much better than 12% over the years. But by having that mentality of focusing on the long term, it grew and grew and grew and grew to the point where he's now one of the richest people in the world, and he did it the right way by focusing on the small things that he could do, by investing in companies for the long term rather than trying to get quick returns. And I'm incredibly grateful that he proved that method works, so that there aren't more people on Wall Street just trying to get quick returns for themselves at the expense of companies that they invest in, or shareholders that take the honest long-term approach to investing.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things, you look at someone like him and it's powerful, the fact that he was able to put in, he claims that, and we could all believe him because of the results that he's been able to produce, that
Yeah,
throughout his life he read 1,000 pages a day. And
yeah, yeah,
his old age, he reads about 600 to 800 because he says, he wanted to lay off the intensity a little bit. But 1,000
yeah,
pages a day is something that nobody's ever heard of. And by 1,000 pages a day, he's reading through for like 8 hours a day these boring, monotonous, stock portfolios and investment books and all of these things that, he's been doing for years, right? Like, he's been doing the same
yeah,
stuff for years, looking at the same financial information, but at the same time he's willing to put in those really boring hours because that's what it takes to succeed.
yeah. That was one of the most powerful lessons I learned in doing all this research, was his idea of embracing boredom. Like,
Mhm.
there's so much about achieving goals that is boring. Waking up and going for a run at 6 a.m. is boring. Reading reading books late into the night rather than doing something fun like playing video games or hanging out with your friends is boring. Doing so much, like even eating healthy is boring as in comparison to going out and splurging on a fancy meal or something. Uh, he chose to embrace boredom. He chose to not chase the hot ticket of the day, but to invest in solid, boring companies that would return a great deal over a long period of time, and it paid off for him in the end. And just having that patience that it takes to learn and make wise decisions about what to do with your money, and to learn how other people react in order to make the most for your investors in the way that he has.
Yeah, I find, both of us are book writers, right? We both
Mm-hmm.
publish books. How boring was it writing that freaking book?
Yeah, yeah, great points. Yeah,
Yeah.
like obviously I was passionate about these topics and I loved sharing it with other people. But there is a lot, like, it's not like you sit down completely inspired and then you put out 250 pages of a book. It's a long, monotonous process of writing on a consistent basis. And some days you're inspired, some days you're not, but you always need to make that consistent progress towards it. And then the editing process, to where
Oh
you have
my.
all your ideas out there, and you need to review all of them, try to look through a critical eye about, does it even make sense? Are people going to understand it? What am I missing here? Where are the mistakes that I made? And go through that, 3 or 4 or 5 times until you get to something that's good and ready to be put out to more editing, and it's a long process.
Exactly. I think,
Yeah.
you described this process, and I couldn't agree more. It's this beautiful curve. Actually, I want to bring out the book that really inspired me. It's called The Dip. And this
Mm.
is exactly what going for goals looks like. Imagine it like a
Hmm.
like a roller coaster. You go up and your inspiration, right? Like, it's a metaphor. Your inspiration is going high and you're setting your goals and
Hmm.
you're so excited, but then, you make it all the way down and you plunge down into this point where you call it the middle and Seth Godin calls it the dip. But it's such a beautiful metaphor. It's literally everybody
Yeah.
goes through this boring, monotonous process. But at the same time, this boring, monotonous process of, the initial fun of it sort of faded away. That's the point where heroes are made.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think anyone who's listening to this right now who has like done something like a 5K or some sort of long run knows the experience of being so excited. You're with a huge crowd at the very beginning of this run. You're going to do great. You come off to a cracking start at the very beginning, and then through 20 to 70% of it, like you're kind of hating yourself that you're going through this. It's just boring pavement that you're just trying to trudge through. Once you hit that 70%, then you see the finish line and you start kicking it at the end. That's why I love his upward curve at the end, because within human nature, if we can just get through that middle where it's really boring, then we see, like, oh my gosh, I'm actually capable of achieving these things. I can see the finish line. I'm going to put on the afterburners and go as fast as I can to the finish because I was capable of this. You just need to get through the middle.
And going with that running analogy, it's like, all right, when do you think most people in the Boston Marathon, they did studies on this, of course, when do you think
Yeah.
most people in the Boston Marathon, a 26-mile race, when do you think they quit?
Mm-hmm.
When do you think was like the highest point, the highest range of them quitting?
Yeah, I mean, somewhere between 10 and 20, I'm assuming. Or, yeah, between 10 and 20, I'm assuming.
Yeah, so it was really between, like, it was more of like 16 to 19, that sort of range.
Okay. Yeah.
Because it's,
Yeah.
once you hit that 20 point, you're like, all right, 6 miles, I've already made it through 20. But then at the same time, it's like, come on, I'm at 16. I still have 10 miles left to go, you know?
Yeah.
And it's, I think with every single goal that we have to pursue, you think of it
Mm-hmm.
like someone who's going to work out, someone who's going to break a bad habit. It's like, all right, I'm going to the gym. First 2 weeks are fun. First 2 weeks are fine. January 12th is the day that most New Year's resolutions fail.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Right? It's like, all right, that's the point where you're sitting there, you're like, oh my God, I'm on my couch. I got to work out for an hour a day. And that's the point where there's the most resistance. That's the middle where people really
Yeah.
just struggle.
Yeah. I would even say podcast episodes. I'm sure that there's probably a lot of people with like 7 or 8 or 10 podcast episodes that quit after that, because it's a lot of long, grueling work, and you have to really believe in yourself to keep at it and actually do what it takes to build a real audience out of it.
Yeah, actually, it's really funny. So the guy that I had on my podcast last week, um, his name's Darius Faru, and he just really guy from Switzerland. And I just hit him up with a cold email. I said, this was in the summer before I even started my podcast. I said, hey,
Sure.
I'm starting up a podcast and I'd really love to have you on. And he replies to me, he goes, contact me in 3 months. And I'm like, why contact you in 3 months? He's like, just contact me in 3 months. And if you contact me and you're doing well, then I will get you on my podcast. And that's exactly what happened. So
Yeah.
I contacted him 3 months later, and I told him, I go, you're going to be my my 18th episode. And he goes, all right,
Yeah.
I'm in. And he told me afterwards, he goes, that was, of course, it was a trick. It was a test, right? And he said,
Sure.
he's like, I get these requests all the time. And the fact that you actually kept going, and the fact that you actually contacted me and remembered, makes it worthwhile,
Yeah.
because most
Yeah.
people who start their podcast quit right away.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the same phenomenon. It's them starting the beginning of the race, and getting all excited about it, and then they realize, oh my gosh, this is a lot of really hard work. You have to face a lot of rejection from people that you're trying to have on the podcast for reasons like that. But if you just stick with it, then you're actually able to develop the audience. You meet a whole bunch of interesting people, and you become more of a master of having great conversations and learning and growing.
Yeah, exactly. And after a while, like you're going to be my 19th podcast, right? And it's like,
Sure.
I've hit the point of consistency, right? When you're
Yeah.
at like 4 or 5, it's okay to drop off. But once,
Mm-hmm.
I've made my way out of the middle and now the dip, and now I'm starting to come to my way of consistency. And now it's, pretty easy to keep posting podcasts because of that, that of course, like, any person who's going to achieve a goal has really felt that stagnation. But that's pushing through that stagnation is really what makes a great podcast, because most people are going to quit.
Absolutely.
Yeah. There was one
Absolutely, my
thing.
friend.
So there are two things that I really wanted to talk about. Just to really, wrap this up, which I found was, two things that really blew my mind. One of them was talking about procrastination, and it goes along the same idea. It's like, if you decide to procrastinate, first of all, huge problem, right? Like you said, 92% of people
Sure.
actually, no, 95% of people say that they procrastinate, and the 5% of people are lying.
Yeah.
And so,
Everyone procrastinates.
yeah, so one of the big predictors that you said of procrastination was impulsivity itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's because with any goal, you don't see the fact that you're going to wake up. You're going to wake up and you're going to be tired and you're not going to want to do it, or it's going to be the end of a long day and you're not going to want to do it. You just don't see yourself in those situations that are just so human, of being tired and exhausted, or having some other life event coming up and getting in the way. And once we decide, once we even start asking ourselves whether or not we should do this thing or put it off for another day, then it's the debate in your head, right? And no matter what, if you really want to procrastinate this thing, you're going to come up with a justification in your head that says, yep, that is a perfectly great thing to do. Like, you'll be able to make up for it 1,000 times tomorrow. And what you really deserve is to put it off for another day for whatever thing it is. That's absolutely accurate.
So there's one topic that, really puts this all together, and I think, gets right into impulsivity and all these things. It's the difference
Mm-hmm.
between, really what is willpower, and then you also describe these concepts are what is willpower, want power, and won't power, and how do they
Yeah.
really impact us being able to achieve our goals?
Sure. Okay. So this was a concept by Stanford health psychologist Kelly McGonigal. I highly recommend her book Willpower, and also The Upside of Stress. She breaks willpower down into 3 different categories. willpower. So this is getting up, going for a run, pushing yourself during that run, pushing yourself to read something or write a book or whatever it is where you really want to quit on something or you don't want to do it and you push yourself to get it done. That's willpower. Willpower is what most people think about when they think about willpower. This is the ability to resist temptation. So the ability to resist food or resist the resist temptations of any kind. That's willpower. And then want power is the motivation you feel when you consider your long-term goals or your higher aspirations. I believe I brought this up in the book, but this is, imagine a boss who gets a lot of attention from an attractive young coworker. If that boss is married, he will be much more able to resist the temptation because he has a wife, he has kids, he has the ability to say no for a higher purpose. Like either way, any kind of sexual attention from an attractive young coworker for a boss is not a good idea. If that person is not married, it's going to be harder for that person to resist because they don't have that higher commitment to something bigger. And the more we can focus or create situations where we are committed to something big that we really believe in. These could be principles, they could be dreams or aspirations of us, they could be associations with our identity. So if we believe that we are the type of person who resists some temptations, or the type of person who finishes strong, for example, or the type of person who doesn't quit when they're writing a book, like that commitment to being that type of person is much, much stronger and gives us more willpower than if we weren't to make that kind of identity or commitment, and we were just trying to get this done on our own.
Yeah, I mean,
Does that all
personally,
make sense?
yeah, I mean, I'll definitely expand on that because when I read that, that is essentially the premise behind my entire book, summed up in such a
Mm,
beautiful statement. When we talk about breaking bad habits, and that's won't power, right? I want to stop
yep.
smoking. I want to resist these bad foods.
Yeah.
I want to get off, like video games, television, social media, like all these terrible things that
hmm
pornography, right? In this case, we're talking about sexual appeal from coworkers, and
hmm
our won't power and our willpower are somewhat finite resources. They kind of run out. We could sort of justify our way around them, but in
hmm
my book, I think one of the most powerful things that one of the most powerful lessons that I have in there is want power, the ability to bring your mind from the present moment to the things that you really care about, from the current
hmm
temptations to your long-term wants, like your relationships, your goals, all these things. That's a
hmm
separate store inside your brain. It's an extra tank that just is sort of sitting next to you of energy, and you could use it if you really want to. If you're trying to resist a cigarette
hmm
and you're saying I shouldn't do that because it's bad for me, it's like, okay, that's won't power, but 70% of current cigarette smokers actually say that they want to quit but can't.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then if you're sitting, with your cigarettes, and there was a great story that Tony Robbins talked about. And Tony Robbins said that there was a man who was smoking, and really bad smoker, like dozens a day. And one day his wife gets his 5-year-old daughter to run into his office crying, and say, I want you to be there for my marriage, you know
Yeah. Yeah.
and that really dug into his want power. So now, every time that he thinks about smoking, he's not thinking, I shouldn't really do this. The image of his
Yeah.
daughter pops up right in his head. And it's like,
hmm
wow, that is the thing that's going to help you, really resist.
Yeah. I was going to bring up that as well. It's the number one thing that helps alcoholics quit too is thinking about their kids, is thinking about the impact that their alcoholism is having on other people besides themselves. Because we can sacrifice our own self-image a lot easier than we can hurt other people that we love and care about.
That's so interesting. I'm literally writing that down because
Yeah.
it's so true. It's like, why would you really dissociate, like especially something as big as smoking or, helping with your health or things like that. Why would you want to dissociate it from your main life goals, especially if
Hmm.
we're saying, and this is a great way to end it actually. When you set a goal, you want to have one main goal. And then every single thing that you do should be in achievement of that goal. So
Yeah. Yeah.
let's say your goal in life is to be a good parent for your kids. It's such a great example. If you do
Hmm.
that, then you decide to associate getting rid of smoking or eating healthier or going on a diet or working out. If you decide to associate that within the realm of being a good parent for your kids, so if you're saying smoking, unhealthy eating, spending too much time on media, all these things actually make you a worse parent, then that aligns you under that one goal. But if you detach those
Hmm.
goals, if you decide to say, you know what, I am going to, on one hand, I am going to be a good parent for my kids. And on the other hand, I'm going to be a good employee. And on the other hand,
Hmm.
I'm going to quit smoking. If you decide to detach those, then it's the same thing as trying to chop at different parts of the tree instead of trying to chop at the
Yeah.
same exact part of the tree and really take down that goal altogether.
Sure. So what would you say is your one overarching goal that you can feed everything into?
I love that. I love that. Now I'm taking questions.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
my overarching goal is I want to have as much influence on the general population as I possibly can. Because I found
Hmm.
that, I really believe that I wanted to be a clinical psychologist when I got older, right?
Hmm.
And maybe you could
Okay.
agree with me on this. So I was like, I want to be a clinical psychologist. And what do clinical psychologists do? They deal with the depressed, they deal with the anxious, they deal with all those people. And I'm like, that would
Hmm.
be cool if I could really help those people. But what I found is that, for every single one person that goes to a psychologist, there are 100 people that either don't have the guts, don't have the money, or don't have the or aren't bad enough to go out
Hmm.
and see a psychologist. There's a
Hmm.
sort of general neurosis, I'll call it, or a
Hmm.
general you know, depression, anxiety, all these things that exist in the general
Hmm.
population. And it really bothers
Sure.
me. It's like, if I wanted to become a psychologist, I'd only be helping the people um, who are in touch with themselves enough to figure it out. And at the same time, the people who are bad enough. And I think that, just giving that little improvement to other people's lives, by helping them break a bad
Sure.
habit, helping them find their purpose, all these things, and just helping the general population. That's definitely my goal. And I'd love either you could answer that or I'd love for you to tell me yours.
Hmm. Well, I think that's definitely. I now work in healthcare, and the number one thing that I'm concerned about is the mental health crisis that will take place over the next 10 years because of exactly what you're talking about. The rising rate of anxiety and depression, mostly from the technology that we're using these days, is not a good sign for the mental health of our society. So I think that's definitely a worthwhile goal, and I wish you nothing but the best in pursuit of that.
Thank you.
Mine, one of the reasons why I wanted to know is because figuring out what mine was one of the most important things because, like you said, all of a sudden everything started to filter through that goal, and that was helping individuals use the tools of science to take control of their future.
Hmm.
So I've been able to do that a lot. Like this book, that was me trying to achieve part of that goal was to help people understand the science of their own willpower in order for them to help take control of their future and create the type of life that they really want for themselves. After this, I started working with other thought leaders to build apps that would help people implement their advice on an ongoing basis and actually track the results over time. Because I realized that I'm not necessarily always the best to be doing that. And now a lot of it is working with companies to help them implement the scientific method when it comes to developing new products so they can learn what new products are actually going to make a difference in people's lives and which ones are just a waste of time and money and energy that's not going to make any difference at all.
Wow. And I mean, I have so much respect for the things that you're doing, because actually there is, I forget which study proved it, but there is an 8-year delay in a research study coming out, scientific,
Mm,
things being proven, and it actually making an impact in the real world and being used in companies
sure.
and being implemented. And I find that, having people like you, having people who are also in touch with the science, who are in touch with the scientific method, and
Hmm.
really in touch with all of the important things that are going on in the scientific world, and using that to actually make an impact on people's lives. That's, what's the purpose of science if it doesn't help us? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yes. I completely agree. And there are so many scientists who are doing the hard, boring work to help us better understand ourselves and each other and the world around us, but they're just not great communicators. They're not very good at making all of their ideas practical and actionable for real people, even though those things are what's going to make the difference in people's lives, like the ones you're talking about right now. And so, yes, let's continue to work to help bring those useful scientific tools to the people who need help.
Exactly. I think, scientists don't really, they don't really get hired by, institutions for their ability to speak.
Nope, no. They serve a very vital role, but they need people to bridge the gap between their research and public understanding and public use, to where they're able to use that research for the benefit of all mankind.
Yeah. Wow. All right. Colin Robertson, thank you so much for being on here. And I would love for you to let everybody know where they could find you on social media, where they could get in touch with you, all those things.
Sure. Okay. So I left social media 3 years ago. It's a
Respect.
very deliberate move of not wanting it to impact my mental health anymore. But anyway, so I'm not on any social media, but you can find my book, The Will of Heroes, on Amazon. Just search The Will of Heroes, Colin Robertson, and you will find it. You can also go to willpowered.co. That's willpower and then ed at the end .co to read my blog.
And I must let everybody know that I personally read the book, The Will of Heroes, and this was an incredible book. Actually, I forgot to do this, but I am going to leave a beautiful Amazon review on this book
Hmm.
afterwards, because it really, I find this book to be a field manual, sort of like a textbook for the things to really, if you're struggling to go through a goal, here are essentially all of the reasons why you shouldn't quit. And here are also the
Mm-hmm.
reasons why you sort of feel like you should quit, but they're all irrational and they all make no sense. So to really get the scientific studies in here, and to really get the logic behind where the human brain falls short and where we could really override that, I found The Will of Heroes, like, this book was absolutely incredible to really help me push through those barriers.
Awesome. Thank you, my friend. I look forward to seeing this podcast come out.
Me too. Hey, thank you so
And
much.
you got it. Good luck making this thing grow. This is exciting for you. And I wish you the best in making that dip go up.
All right. Wow. Thank
All
you.
right.
Wow. Thank you so much. Hey, listen, I really do appreciate you having on. Would you mind, like, I usually like to,
Mhm.
like, have a chat, 5 minutes afterwards. Um,
So I gotta meet my girlfriend pretty quick, but
oh,
sure,
really?
I'll chat with you really quickly. Yeah.
Listen, first of all, did you watch The Social Dilemma?
No, I saw like the first 15 minutes of it, but I love Tristan Harris. I really appreciate the work that he's doing.
I watched that
His
documentary.
work, yeah, his work was what led me to learn more about brain hacking in Silicon Valley and how it's
Really?
messing up our youth, especially. Yeah,
Yeah, no, I mean, personally, I've been really thinking about quitting social media. I've been really, really
hmm
considering it.
it's it's a tough move, but I don't regret it. But I'd already built up a very strong email list at that point, so I felt like I was in. I wanted to put all of my time and energy towards working on my email list rather than promoting myself on social media.
Interesting. All right, no, I'm definitely gonna look into it. And honestly, dude, like, I would love to have you on maybe another podcast so we could talk about the mental
Mm,
health crisis, because like that is so like both, like both of us have that same, idea that
yeah.
the awareness that it's really taking over everything.
Yeah, I would love to. I got a lot of thoughts on the topic, and I'd love to have another discussion on it.
Thank you so
All
much,
right,
and I will
take
talk to you
care.
later.
Yeah.
See ya.